After over a year since the teaser trailer and half a year since the release of Rune Factory 4 Special, we have finally been blessed with a proper trailer for Rune Factory 5. That's right folks, the Twitter summoning rituals were a success, and we finally have gameplay footage of what might become the new addiction of many people, and it looks fantastic. So let's dive straight into what the trailer showed off. First things first, let's go over the game's visuals. Sure, visuals are far from the most important thing in gaming, but it is the first thing we see of a game. It is the first impression, and not to mention, it's the only thing we can properly judge the game on before we actually have it in our hands. Sure, the gameplay and other footage might look good or bad before we get it, but with most games we don't know for sure until we actually get the game out, released into the world, and are actually playing it. The visuals we can get a fairly good idea on before a game even comes out, and as such I find it to be the most appropriate starting point for this video. One very important thing to note is that the game is still in an unfinished state, and that is most noticeable with the visuals. Some I've seen talking about game are fearful that the game will still have some issues once finished, but I'm not very concerned, as even nowadays a lot of finished games look worse than this. Let's start with the protagonist. Overall, I really like their designs. The male protagonist has a really nice, satisfying blend of whites and blues that looks much better than the blandness of Lest from Rune Factory 4. Although I found Frey in Rune Factory 4 to be very adorable, the actual outfit design for the female protagonist in Rune Factory 5 is far superior in my opinion. Like Frey, it's not that hard to notice that tiny bit of Chang hanging off her left breastplate and wondering why is that there. I'm honestly wondered that for years. I'm glad knowing I won't be wondering something similar about Rune Factory 5's protagonist for years as well. In general, Rune Factory designs have at times had some bizarre decisions that make no sense, and it seems that the choices made in 5 are not that bad. They make sense, and the outfits of both characters are much more pleasant to look at in my opinion. Another issue of previous Rune Factory protagonist designs are just an overall sense of blandness, which makes sense. They're basically a blank slate for the player to do whatever they want with the characters. But that doesn't mean we can't have pretty to look at, cool looking designs like we have here. And I'm happy we're getting some solid designs for the protagonist. The game's other characters' designs are also quite nice. In particular, I like a Knight Dude and Elf Lady whose names I do not know. Game's cutscenes also seem to use a beautiful mix of Persona-like 2D animation and 3D models, and it looks absolutely lovely. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm actually kinda hyped for these cutscenes, as odd as that actually sounds. Now, for how everything looks in-game, let's start with the bad, as this is where most of the negatives are. I think it would be best to get the bad over with and then move to the good, which far outweighs the bad. First off, although the game is by far the best looking Rune Factory game, its art style is very similar to a lot of other anime-esque games, and as a result, I wouldn't be surprised if people pass over it as just another generic anime-styled game, thus missing out on this game. The greatest game in the world won't sell if people ignore it for looking too generic. Textures also seem to get blurry at a relatively close distance compared to most other games. This can be very clearly seen in an image found from an xseed.com article of the female protagonist walking on the beach, where the somewhat close rocks in the background are much more blurry than their beautiful surroundings, seeming out of place. This is however not a very big issue, at least not for me personally, so I'd rather focus on the positives for a moment. I love how big and open the environment seemed to be. Exploration was so much fun in Rune Factory 4, and I'm looking forward to exploring the world of Rune Factory 5. The lighting and animation are also very beautiful, so vibrant, so fluid in motion, just all around pretty. Even the 2D character portraits, like previous Rune Factory games, namely 3 and 4, are wonderful. And like, I believe, special episodes in Rune Factory 4, they are slightly animated. Overall, despite some flaws, this game is gorgeous in my honest opinion. Now, on to farming. All the farming they've showed in the trailers was done on the back of a soaring dragon, originally shown in last year's teaser trailer along with another dragon, a volcano world, and a kitsune. It is a mobile farm essentially, and I'd imagine there is still a traditional farm at home, but having another farm is always nice. I could potentially see all of these majestic creatures shown in the teaser trailer being accessible as farming areas, and each being a different season, but keep in mind I'm just speculating, so take anything I say with a grain of salt. One thing I've heard many comment on is that farming in this game reminds them of Rune Factory Frontier, but without a Rune system, at least from what we've seen. As someone who's never really played that game, I don't really have much to say other than that it makes sense to take an approach similar to Frontier for this, as Rune Factory 5 is 3D like Frontier and Tides of Destiny, and most people would agree that Tides has the worst farming in the series. Every game in the main numbered series tries to improve on elements from previous entries, so it only makes sense for them to take a Frontier approach to farming for this game. The game also seems to take a few elements from Rune Factory 4 farming, mainly the return of the giant crops. Regards to crops in general, I don't see any new crops, which is interesting. There's generally been crops added as the series progressed, something they haven't shown, as they likely want to either showcase them in a later trailer or let the players find out about them when they play for the first time. Either way, if there are new crops to be grown, I'm excited to try them out before ditching them entirely, because strawberries, pineapples, and stupid expensive ones like the golden crops far outclass the majority of crops a lot of the time. This one is a bit mixed for me personally. The combat in this game appears to mostly resemble Tides of Destiny. It also adds in the ability to do combo attacks with your party members. These look flashy, cool, and effective, but this also comes at a cost of flow between actions. For example, in Rune Factory 4, you could easily go from attack to attack either with chain attacks, cancelling the attack with a dash, or cancelling it with another move during the animation. The issue is, though, that the game wasn't really balanced around this fast-paced action, and as a result, a lot of the regular enemies and some of the bosses on lower difficulty levels became a test of button mashing. Sure, the bosses didn't have these issues on harder held difficulty, but it was still there for regular mobs. Despite these balancing issues, though, it was insanely fun and a big reason why I love Rune Factory 4 so much. I was kinda hoping Rune Factory 5 would try and fix the balancing issues with this, but I see why they went a different path. Sure, Rune Factory 4's combat could be altered to work in a 3D environment, but it just makes more sense to take a combat that people also love from Tides and try to improve that, as Tides is already a 3D game. But back to the team attack system, although I don't like it messing with the flow of combat, I love the potential it has to be a vast improvement on Rune Factory 4's party system. In Rune Factory 4, you could team up with townsfolk and equip both you and them with any weapon or other piece of equipment. I'm wondering if the weapons equipped will change the animation, damage output, range, or a whole host of other properties for these team attacks. Perhaps a bit of wishful thinking, considering that in the trailer in both instances where this was shown, both party members had the same weapon, but I could definitely see Marvelous fleshing this out more than what most people would expect. Back when the teaser trailer first dropped last year, YouTuber Wilder theorized that a player could be part of a monster fighting guild based on the fact that an image of what was assumed to be the player's house was absolutely massive, had a blue shield sign on a balcony, and had a request board right outside it. Turns out he was mostly correct, as replaced the word guild with the word ranger, and you got a basic premise to Rune Factory 5's story, or at least the gist of what we know right now. Either losing your memory, you find yourself in the town of Rigbarf, a town blessed by nature. You are taken by a group of peacekeeping rangers who protect the citizens of the town from monsters and help with a variety of tasks. That's about all we know at the moment, however. One idea I've heard over the years since Rune Factory 4 is the potential for the game to take place in a sex empire, as Rune Factory 4's ending mentioned it was starting to go through a period of rapid political change, and people are hoping to maybe experience that from the perspective of one of the people living in a sex empire and play through it. Given the new footage, however, I doubt this is the game's location. The bright, nature-filled, seemingly magical look of Rigbarv seems to suggest that it takes place in NORAD as opposed to the more industrial Sex Empire. Regardless though, given how great the stories of some of the previous Rune Factory games are, I am looking forward to see what this one has in store. It can be expected the game will come out in Japan first, as not only does the Japanese direct listed as Spring 21 as opposed to the English simply stating 2021, but it has been this way for the entire Rune Factory series, unless I'm mistaken. Assuming no delays, the game can be anticipated to come out sometime between the beginning of March to the end of May next year in Japan and elsewhere a few months later. Regardless of when the game comes out, however, one thing is for certain. I am hyped as fuck for the triumphant return of one of my favorite series, as are many others. Rune Factory is back from the dead and looks ready to make the most out of its second chance of life. And I cannot wait to see more of it.